So today's message, the title of this message, I hope you guys don't run, but it's the anatomy of sin. The anatomy of sin. Have you ever looked at someone's life and thought, how did they end up there? How many pastors have you guys seen that ended up being exposed and forced out of ministry because of adultery or greed? Anybody? How many husbands have you guys known that walked away from their marriages? And I mean, it's not like they've been married for a year or two, but there are people who've been married for 30 years, 40 years, and all of a sudden they wake up and you're sitting there like, what happened here? Have you ever, like, one of the things that I do constantly is wherever I am, as I'm like doing life, driving, walking, wherever, I look at a family or a person and I'm like, this person, they have a family. They have siblings potentially. They have parents alive or dead. They have a history. They're making choices. They're thinking. And I actually think a lot like, how did they end up where they are? Whether they're poor and broke or bound, or like a teenager or even an adult who's still overdosed or is doing drugs or is running around or poorly, looks after their finances or commits fraud. Somebody where you're like, man, I respected you and honored you. And all of a sudden I see that, wow, you've been ripping everybody off all this time. And for us, it comes as a shock when things like that come to life. But a lot of times there's something that's been happening behind the scenes in all these cases that we're not privy to. And so the question always becomes like, what happened? Let me put it this way. Has anyone asked you, like, hey man, what happened to you? Like, it could be good or bad. Like, if you've completely lost your way and you're just doing whatever, and someone's like, an honest friend's like, dude, man, you're off the rails. What happened to you? Meaning something along the way has put you in this place where either you are where you should be or you are where you shouldn't be. And that's the moment when we notice the sin, that we notice that something is wrong. That's the moment that everyone sees it and it's obvious. But a lot of times those things, and we all know this, so this is nothing new, but it's fascinating that Jesus exposes this and that James talks about this in Scripture, how all this stuff happens. And, science comes to us and talks about our pathways and what happens, but the Bible kind of like beat him to it. And it makes sense because if Jesus is our creator, then he understands how we work. So he's trying to set us in a way that aligns with his heart because that is the best possible outcome. So when things happen that we don't understand, we then begin to explore that explosion, trying to figure that out. But Jesus goes, I see the explosion, but I'm actually going to talk about the spark. It's obvious that there was an explosion, but what's not so obvious is what sparked it. And in most cases, those sparks are so subtle and unnoticeable that you have to really peel back things in order to understand what's happening. So we find ourselves in Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. And just like with murder, Jesus addresses something that's like, oh, you see this. It's a physical act. And Jesus is trying to pull away and say, let's talk about the invisible sin. The sin that you're committing that no one knows or no one sees. Show of hands, who is currently sinning privately, invisibly? See, no one's going to raise their hands. Of course not. Of course not. You're not going to be like, oh yeah, me. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. I know we subconsciously will be like, oh yeah, of course we do things in private. No, what are you currently doing where you're like, just leave it there. That's what Jesus is after this morning. And that will either make you grateful because he's pulled you out of that life, or it's gonna make you worrisome because you're gonna be convicted. Being convicted is the best discipline that Jesus can offer, because conviction allows us to humble ourselves. We talked about this at midweek this past week. Jesus says to humble, or the scripture says to humble yourself. Because if you don't humble yourself, then Jesus is going to do something that you're not going to like, which is he's going to humiliate you by exposing you, so that then he can force you to be humble. But we're not humble until we're challenged and convicted. And so don't brush up. If you're convicted, I don't know your secret life. And so this is not really for anyone particular. This is just what Jesus is teaching the people and what he's teaching you and I. And so we find ourselves in verse 27. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at the woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away from you. For it is better for you to lose one of your body parts than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand is causing you to sin, cut it off and throw it away from you. For it is better for you to lose one of your body parts than for your whole body to go into hell. Those are not light words. He's not like saying, hey, if you sin, I got grace, no big deal, walk it off. He's not talking about when you sin. He's actually saying, that, look, it is better that if you find the thing that's causing you to do this thing, it's better for you to take, not even it's better, it says it's critical that you take extreme measure. We live in a culture that we treat sin lightly. Say amen? We treat sin lightly because we've compromised so much that for us, it's not that big of a deal anymore. And that's the lie that we have bought. It's no big deal. It doesn't hurt anyone. See, our culture thinks that sin is breaking rules. And then religion comes and tells you that sin is about your bad behaviors. And Jesus is saying something completely different. He's basically saying, look, sin, all those things are true. It's bad behaviors, but sin at the root of it is simply this. It's disordered love. Disordered love is what sin is. And how do we know this? Because who says, hey, today I'm going to mess my life up? I'm a candidate. Nobody. And who's just like, man, I hate to sin. I'm going to do it. I hate it. I'm going to do it. No, you're like, I love this. You wouldn't sin if you didn't love it. You only hate it when you look at it after you've done it. Because you're so judgmental and so righteous. You only hate it when someone else does it. But we offer so much grace to ourselves. And I say this before, a lot of times we offer so much grace to ourselves because we see the person's action, we judge them based on their action, but ourselves, we judge ourselves by our intention. So we never intend to do things. We just end up doing things. No one thinks that sin is going to produce anything good. No one commits adultery because they want to destroy their family. No one starts doing drugs because they want to be bound to it. They want something else because sin promises something that it doesn't deliver, but it promises. And we would rather take the promises of sin than the promises of God. Those are the choices that we have. And sin promises excitement, affection, validation. Sin offers escape. Like when you lie, it's not because you love lying, it's because you want to preserve yourself. Right? It's self-serving. Nobody steals because they love to steal. Maybe they love the rush of it. Like not getting caught and stuff. But a lot of times people steal because they are lacking. And when you're lacking, you don't have security. So you want security. You want something to make you feel like you have enough. No one gossips because they want to destroy people's lives. When you gossip, you bring significance to yourself. You say, have you heard? And everyone's like, heard what? Come, follow me. I'll let you know. You know, we have people like Candace. We have preachers like Oh, there's so many of them. Let me give you the revelation. Oh, you have another revelation from the Lord. Yes, come follow me. We live in that, and people feed off of that. Because every sin is a good desire, but it's pursued in the wrong way. Like, think about it. It's like you're trying to attain something in the wrong way, or it's something that's elevated above God. Like, we think of, hey, sin is just doing bad things. But you know, the Bible says that if you know to do good and you don't do it, it is sin for you. Oh, snaps. You can be sinning and not sinning as far as the world is concerned. But God is saying, if you know to do good and you turn yourself away from doing good, God's like looking at you like, why are you sinning? Those are strong words. Is when we think of sinning, we're thinking of what the Pharisees were trying to do. Just look at the appearance: adultery, murder. Those are like the big dogs. And Jesus is like, yeah, but the place where it came from is a place that you have to address. Because what you see is the manifestation of something deeper. Eden, like in Eden, Eve was not hungry. She didn't eat the fruit because she was hungry. Like, that was like the manifestation of something that she believed. What did she believe? Whatever the serpent told her. What did the serpent tell her? You're not enough. God's not enough. God's not enough. Have more. Nothing wrong with eating the fruit. But when you feel like, and when you believe that God is not after the best for you, you think that you know better than God. So every sin is that. When we think of sin, a lot of times we think of David. Who knows the story of David and not Goliath? Someone said Goliath. Yeah, we think of David and Bathsheba right up on par with, think about this, the greatest defeat, Goliath, the greatest defeat, Goliath, and the greatest loss, Bathsheba. But David wasn't looking for Bathsheba. She was just there. David was looking for relief because purpose had disappeared. Mission had disappeared. He became an idol king. His heart was restless. And then beauty appears. And so the temptation was never Bathsheba. The temptation was that Bathsheba can give David something that David didn't have. And we'll unpack that in a moment. So he says, you see all these things. You've heard it say, don't commit adultery. But I'm telling you, there's another layer to this. And that's what I want to address, which is what? The heart. He says, he changes the conversation from because when you think about it, when I say adultery, you think of one thing, right? When I say your heart, it changes what you're thinking about. So Jesus is saying, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you, and he's not saying that doesn't matter. Of course it matters. He's saying, this is what is meant by do not commit adultery. He says, the heart is the problem because you're lusting. You're lusting, and that is the problem. And lust is not just sexual. You can lust for a lot of things. You can envy a lot of things. You can desire and want a lot of things. So, this is where Satan beats us all the time. Because he doesn't paint us the picture of the result. He goes and attacks our heart. Because he never promises and puts destruction in your mind because you wouldn't do it. How does Satan unravel your life? Let me tell you just one thing that if you stop this, you can stop a lot of destructions. Are you guys ready for this? Okay. Satan starts with permission. He simply whispers, it's just a thought. The kids say nowadays, it ain't that deep. That's Satan's line. It ain't that deep. Yes, it is. It is deeper than you think it is. But he makes you think like it's not going to hurt anybody, not a big deal, nobody sees, nobody knows. It doesn't count if I don't act on it, right? I share this story all the time. I remember I was getting my tires or something changed, and we were like on Penn Avenue, and there's a store that's kind of overlooking, and I'm talking with the guy on the counter, and trying to figure some stuff out. And, and I'm looking at him, and he kind of looks past me. He goes, "Ooh, wow. Look at that. She is so hot. Oh, my gosh. I could bang, She just words that loud. Sorry, kids. But he was saying all this stuff. You will encounter this in real life. He said, and I was like, what are you doing? So I didn't even look. I'm just looking at him, and I'm like, he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, yeah. I was like, why do you do that? He goes, oh, it's not a big deal. It's not like I'm going to go do anything. He's like, my wife says, you can look, but you cannot touch. And I'm like, yeah, but looking will lead you to touching. Just give it some time. But we give ourselves permission that as long as there's not a physical action behind it, it's okay. This is why the Bible talks about the battle is in your mind. You have to pre-decide where your boundaries are, what your guardrails are. And it's not just you make a decision once and you're like, okay, I'm good. No, every day you have to reinforce the boundaries that you've set before you. Otherwise, he's going to come in here and move your boundaries. And how does he move them? He asks for your permission. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. And Satan's he's so patient, he's so long-suffering that he will wait a year or 2 years or 3 years to keep moving, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And that's when we don't notice it. There's a story of a church who split, and so they're like, the church was split, and the reason they split is because they made a decision of wanting one thing, and the other people didn't want it, and yada yada, and then whatever, they split. So the church is split. They're like, man, okay, we want to do something else here, but we don't want to cause another split. And what the thing they wanted to do is they wanted to move the piano from one side to another. And the thing is this, that when you see the change immediately, you react in response. But when you see it slowly, you don't even notice that it moved. So they moved the piano from one side to another without anyone even noticing that they did that. Even though it's right in front of you, it doesn't connect. It doesn't register that something is changing. Because we're on alert. If it's evil, if it's bad, if it's obviously destructive, we're not going to do it. Satan's like, I know you're not, so I'm not going to attack you in that way. I'm going to come in a way that you let your guards down, and I'm going to whisper and ask for your permission. Think about it. Sometimes we think like Satan's going to come and destroy our lives, and we're just like helpless. No, he goes, dude, no, you let me in, bro. You let me in. I asked you. I did not do something that you did not want to do. This is why we can't say, well, the devil made me do it. I love what Martin Luther famously said. He said, you can't keep birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from building a nest in your hair. Our passivity is our contribution to our own destruction. This is why we need boldness. We need to know what we stand for. We need to know where our boundaries are. We need to understand that everything begins in our heart. And our heart is not an emotion. Like in the West, we think our heart is where we feel everything with. No, in this time, with the ancient Jews, they never believed that your heart was your emotions. For them, the heart was the center of your entire system. So if Satan can compromise your heart, he's compromised you years before it's evident physically. This is why you'll see there's a lot of people who are on their journey of being exposed. They just are. And you don't have to have a platform to be exposed. You can be exposed in your own family, by your spouse, by your children. You can be exposed by your work, by your friends. The Jews, and when the Bible talks about the heart, and I know we'd like you think about it in three, there's a three-person Trinity thing. Oh, that's all there, but when you're reading Scripture, when it talks about the heart, it's talking about your entire command center, your command post, which includes your mind, your will, your affections, your desires, your memory, your identity, your imagination, your decision-making. This is why we read in Proverbs 4:23, watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. In the NLT, it says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Why guard your heart? Because from there, everything happens. Everything comes from there. Jesus says, out of the heart, adulterers, murderers, liars, greed, everything. So the heart is not a room in your life. The heart is your whole house. It includes all these compartments. And so she's saying, like, this is where everything happens. It's like in the house, when you're building a house, you can look at the paint, you can look at, but when you fail to look at the foundation of the house, the whole thing sits on it. So it becomes the most critical part of the house. When you're remodeling and you're removing walls, you can remove the walls, but you have to determine whether they are bearing points or not. Because if you remove the wrong wall, the whole thing comes down. If you buy a beautiful house and there's termite damage in the foundation, you're done. And just saying, you're looking at the outside and just saying it's only a matter of time before the whole thing collapses. It's only a matter of time. And so Jesus is always going after the heart because that is the foundational. And it's interesting, Jesus chose the word looks instead of touches. He says, if anyone looks at a woman lustfully, because he's talking about the imagination. The physical act is going to be the manifestation of what's happening inside the heart. So he's saying that if you begin to entertain it, which is not like a simple look. No, the word for look is deeper than just a quick glance. It is lingering. It is gazing. It is cultivating something within you from that look. It's building a structure within you. So now that it's entered your imagination, it's there. And now that it's there, you begin to rehearse the imagination. With David, we read in 2 Samuel verse 11, it begins in the spring when the kings go to war. David remained in Jerusalem. That's his first sin. Why? Because he abandoned his purpose. And when you abandon your purpose, you become vulnerable. And whenever you're vulnerable, you seek pleasure. After that, he wandered. Then he looked. Then he kept looking. Then he inquired. Then he invited. Then he committed adultery. Then he murdered. James 1:14 says, but each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin. Sin, when it runs its course, brings forth death. So you have desire being conceived, being birthed, it grows, produces death. Jesus is trying to expose the fact that nobody ruins their life accidentally. No one does. There's always a pregnancy before there's a birth. And so Jesus is saying, what I'm trying to address is I'm trying to stop the conception of it. Not try to deal with it after it's been born. Joseph is on the other end of the spectrum though. Right? In Genesis chapter 39, he's confronted with a similar decision. And in verse 9, he says, how then could I do this great evil to sin with Potiphar's wife, who's trying to entice him. It says day after day. He was required, look, his heart was so set on the things of the Lord that he was in the house every single day because that was his work. And he didn't stumble and fall. And David had one glance and his life was completely shattered. One glance versus a daily thing. And this is what he says, how then could I do this great evil, and I love this phrase, and sin against God? When we sin, we're thinking about how will people see this? If people find out, what are they gonna say? What are they gonna do? What is it gonna cost me? All this other stuff. So we're looking at like, oh, adultery, everyone knows, look at this thing. Murder, everyone knows, and God's like, but at the heart of it, if you don't fear the Lord, it's just a matter of time. Joseph was not like, man, as long as I don't get caught. That's what Potiphar's wife was saying. Hey, it's just you and I won't say anything. You cool? He goes, no, he ain't cool. Day after day. Why? Because he says, I will not sin first and foremost against God. So this is why when we are talking about our imagination, a lot of us, what we really need to do is be confronted that our imagination is running wild. We're just like chasing things, going, and just no, capture what's happening in your imagination. Take a second and think, what are you continually replaying in your mind over and over and over again? This is the hidden sin that no one sees, but that you know. And God is confronting you right now. And you can look around and no one knows. You can be the most Christian-looking person. And God's like, you could be a week away from destroying your life. So the question is, what do you do when you're bored? Where does your imagination go? No one finds pornography whenever their life is amazing. No one tries to find another person to have an affair with if their marriage is fantastic. It's not how it works. No one has an emotional affair because they're deeply satisfied with their current spouse. No, there's a dissatisfaction and trying to find that in the wrong way. Misplaced love. So what if lust grows in places where you are spiritually bored? Where nothing has captured your heart. Like you show up for church, you're like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. Your heart's not burning to reach your city. The mission, I don't know, I'm just going to work, I'm just making money. The purpose, what kind of value you bring, what's driving you? Are you like on the brink of just becoming spiritually bored? Because if you are, that's a soil for lust and for lies to begin to take root in your heart and destroy your life. And so what we have to do is we have to stop, and this is like this last portion of what I want to talk about, is we have to diagnose your desires. Because, show of hands, do you have things in your mind that you play on loop that you don't see in real life? Raise your hand. Every person. Okay. Just because something is on a loop, it doesn't mean that it's a sin. But it is a place where that could infect your imaginations. Because the thing that you behold is the thing that you're going to be drawn towards. This is what Scripture says, behold Jesus. Make him the center of your life, because he then becomes the filter for all other things. And if you are not getting satisfied with Jesus, then you will seek satisfaction in other places. And it's not because Jesus cannot satisfy you, cannot make you content. It's just that you don't give him the relationship and the gaze and the attention that's required for something deeper to be developed. So when you're going after quick fixes, you'll find quick fixes. It'll happen. But you have to diagnose what's happening with your desires. So instead of saying, hey, do I struggle with XYZ? We need to begin to ask deeper questions than, do I struggle with XYZ? You should be asking, what will this thing give me that I don't have right now? Don't just look at it at the surface. Say, where will this lead? A good way of doing it is basically saying, hey, okay, so if I do this, then what? Okay, and then what? And then what? If I get this, if I attain this success, if I get this money, then what? Then what? If you are not satisfied with Jesus, you will be seeking satisfaction and contentment with all other things. So what fantasy do you revisit most often in your mind? Like, you're like, man, this is where I go in my mind all the time. What future are you trying to secure in your mind? Like, man, if only I had this, then this. What are the things that you're just like, like, man, if someone, do you have a person in your life where you're like, man, if they just approve me, then I'm content. Like, everyone else can say yes, but if this person says no, then I'm just like unsettled and insecure. In our minds, like, we have these things that we're lingering on because it, especially when you're disappointed, it keeps producing imaginary conversations so that you're not in a place where you are. So the first thing is you have to begin to diagnose, like, look at yourself, like, okay, what's really happening here? What do I gravitate to? When you're busy, you don't think about it, but when you're not, that's when things really begin to take root. That's when you really see. So you might as well start asking those questions. Those are humbly questions because you're going to have to face some things that you're just like left on the back burner. And when you begin to diagnose yourself, you're like, hold on a second. I used to have my guardrails here. Now I realize that my guardrails are way here. But you don't know to fix that unless you begin to think about it. The second thing is, as you're evaluating, then because once you kind of realign things back, then you begin to guard your imagination, guard your heart. Because this is where you're rehearsing things. So what you're rehearsing in your mind, that's what you're going to expect, and that's what you're actually going to build your life into. And this is why I was saying, like, I don't remember where, but it's like when people who are negative vocally, they're always negative, there's always drama, there's always things. In their mind, you can just imagine the things that they're going through over and over and over. So as you hear it, and have you ever been around a person where you're like, man, I need to breathe. I need you just give me some space. Can you imagine that that's what you see? That's the manifestation of about what's happening. What's their imagination like? What are they repeating over and over and over and over again? This is what Jesus is saying, hey, feed yourself with truth. Put this on your mind. Put this on your lips. Focus on things that are lovely, that are of good report. That means you cut off the news. You have to do some hardcore elimination of your life, the shows that you watch, the music that you listen to, not because God is telling you to do things, but because you're going to choose to begin to preserve your heart. Is this helping anyone? So if you don't evaluate, you don't know what to address. But once you evaluate, then you have to take the steps of addressing those things. And it's not just getting rid of things, but it's just creating guardrails so you can begin to feed the right things. And then you just stay on mission. When you have nothing to do and you become vulnerable. And when you have purpose in your life, purpose protects your integrity. It does, because you don't want nothing to mess up this purpose, the thing that you're trying to live out. And then, the last thing, and I guess you can actually put this like in all things, is fall in love again. Fall in love with God again. Augustine says that our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee. C.S. Lewis says that our desires are not too strong, but too weak. And this is a really good point. The answer to lust is not to lust less or to have less desire. It's to actually find a greater desire. It's to find something. Because every sin is an attempt to solve a legitimate need in an illegitimate way. So it's not just about saying, I need to move away from all this. No, put it into the right perspective. Put it into the right place. Because when it sits right, then you're going to be able to do right. And that's where, for me, like that's where it is. The answer is not try harder to move away. The answer is come close to Jesus. Make him the center. Make him your gauge. Make him that everything bounces from. All of your ideas, of your thing. Because Jesus, when you were with him, you realize that lust isn't wanting too much. Lust is actually settling for too little. Jesus saying, I want to give you abundant life. And you're like, nah, I'm good with just mediocre. But if you don't believe that, if you think that you have a better way, then you will reject Jesus and what Jesus has to offer over and over again. This is why in Galatians we read in chapter 5, but I say to you, walk by the Spirit and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. This is how we have to walk in alignment with the Spirit, because it's not about being tempted. We will be tempted. But what the difference between temptation and sin is simply this, is temptation is at the door, but then turns into sin when we open the door and let it in. Like I said in the beginning, Satan's gonna ask for permission. And he will take more than you give him, but he's not gonna just do things on his own. He's gonna make sure that your hand is involved in it. Okay. We're gonna step into communion because I think this connects beautifully to the table. You know, when we're talking about sin and what captures our heart. Because Jesus didn't die for a version of us that we present to people. You know, he didn't die for a version that we present to people. He died for the real person, the real us, the broken us, the sinful us, the us that's struggling, the us that's trying to understand, the us that's hidden from everyone else. His body was broken because sin had broken us. Sin has destroyed things. And so when we come up to the table, at the table, Jesus is saying, I'm not forgiving you the things that people see only. I am stepping into, and I want to defeat the things that no one sees, but you wrestle with every day.